On November 27th, 1930, in northern Canada, an entire Inuit village vanished off the face of the earth. This is the story of the village of Angikuni Lake. In northern Canada lies a territory named Nunavut. At the time, it was called Northwest Territories, and throughout this giant swath of land lies snow, ice, trees, and several bands of Inuit tribes. In the 1930s, one tribe briefly made international headlines when a mind-bending mystery struck the nation. A tribe of about 30 people vanished overnight. So this is what Joe LaBelle would have looked like. He was a fur trapper in the 1930s. He spent most of his life in isolation 500 miles north of where any other white man dared to go. Canada's harsh, frozen north where temperatures averaged minus 15 degrees. He would occasionally stumble upon an Inuit village, including the Angikuni tribe at Angikuni Lake. So on that night, in late November, Joe LaBelle made his way to Angikuni Lake, looking for a place to rest. As the Inuit tents came into sight, he saw no signs of life. LaBelle began to worry. According to a Halifax newspaper article reporting on the story, this is when Joe first began to inspect the tents. And this is where it gets eerie. As he poked his head inside the tents, he found signs of life long abandoned. A pot with food in it hanging over a fire that has since gone cold. In another tent, he found children's clothing being stitched, a needle still stuck inside, like someone had put it down and fled in a hurry. Under a coat and some other old clothing, he found a rifle, rusted from the snow. If the people of the Inuit village had left, why would they leave behind things that they need, rifles and clothing? Why would they not finish their tasks, put the needle away, clean up and pack up and get ready to go? Somebody left in a hurry. But why? Two more things that Joe noticed, according to the news article. One, an old Inuit grave had been dug up, and two, and this might be the most horrifying, tied to a stump about 100 yards from camp, 7 dogs, all skin and bone, dead from starvation. It is clear whoever was here left in the blink of an eye and left everything they own behind. So this is where the Northwest Mounted Police get involved. They are a division of the federal police force in Canada, so think the FBI, but with funny hats. That first newspaper article from Halifax indicated that the mounted police had questioned other white trappers to see if they had heard anything about this village. That story was also picked up in Danville, Virginia, USA, so this story was now getting a little bit of international attention. But there were some serious questions about how much effort the police really put into investigating this disappearing village. That far north, roads don't go there. Essentially, the only way to get to this village would be by snow dogs. In the documentation available, including the official police report from Archives Canada, there is no record of anyone from the police ever attempting to visit this village. Yet, just 40 days later, Sergeant Nelson released his report. He stated there was no foundation for this story and determined that Joe LaBelle was a real person. However, there is no record of any attempt to ever get in contact with Joe LaBelle, the witness. You must remember, this is the 1930s. Canada, at the time, looked at its indigenous population as a nuisance at best. The country was not far removed from its genocidal past, and at the time, they were forcibly removing kids from their homes who were indigenous to put them in residential schools where they would be punished for ever speaking their language, and there's belief that there was widespread sexual abuse at a lot of these schools. It's unlikely that the police in Canada would spend much energy investigating the disappearance of a people that they wished weren't there to begin with. On the other hand, perhaps the reason the police didn't look into this with too much effort is because it just didn't seem believable. Critics have pointed out holes in Joe LaBelle's story. For example, in the original news article, it says that sealskin kayaks are what the Inuit were using. However, seals are located on the coast. Anjikuni Lake is so far inland that this would be the furthest inland use of sealskin kayaks ever documented in history. However, the biggest red flag about the story was the spiritual component. The article goes out of its way to mention more than once Tronrark, which I could be pronouncing wrong. It's the evil spirit believed in by the Eskimo people who is known to haunt and terrorize the Inuit. The natives live in fear of Tronrark, and they wear charms to ward him off. I thought about Tronrark and had to make an effort to put the picture out of my mind. The story of Angikuni Lake then began to take on a life of its own. Sci-fi novelists all over the world began to pick up the story, but it wasn't until the 1980s that it began to morph into legend. The World's Greatest UFO Mysteries was released in 1983. They added to the story, saying the village was 1,200 people and that there were 3 fur trappers and that aliens took them. A book called Mysterious Canada picked up the story in 1988, and then it was published by People magazine. From there, several publications in the 21st century also printed the story, adding their own twist, including walking zombies. The Canadian police have since stated that the whole thing was a hoax right from the beginning. So Joe LaBelle is a real person, mentioned in a real news article about a possibly fake village. Did the reporter make up a story on a slow news day? If so, why use the real name of a real fur trapper? It gives credit to your story, but it also puts it in severe jeopardy. Were the Canadian police right to not spend much effort investigating this mystery? Satellite views of the lake today show no signs of life, but it's been nearly 100 years, and no one is recorded to have visited the lake until close to the 21st century. So the legend of Anjikuni Lake lives on, along with other interesting, creepy, and weird Canadian history, which you can learn more about by clicking subscribe, and if you've made it this far, do me a favor and give me a like. It really helps.